Hey, I'm Mike Turner, your friendly filmmaker, and today I'm very, very excited because today I'm talking about the JVC GY-LS300, which is their cinema camera that I've been using for the past couple of months. We're going to talk about some of the pros, some of the cons, and I'll give you my overall opinion on what I think. I'm really, really excited. Really, really, really excited about this particular review. Hit the damn theme music. So first and foremost, let's talk about one of the most important things about this camera, and that is the image sensor. It uses a Super 35 image sensor. So this is not your typical video camera with one of those small 2/3 of an inch sensors or a 1/2 inch sensor. It actually gives you the ability to put on different lenses, and it has a bigger sensor so you can get that shallow depth of field. Number two, like I just said, you can change the lenses. It comes with a micro four thirds mount, so you can put micro four thirds lenses on this natively and they'll work with no problems. So if you put a Panasonic lens that has a power zoom in it, it will actually work with the camera and you can use the zoom rocker to zoom in and out. So that's a pretty cool feature. Another thing is, because it's a micro four thirds mount, you can pretty much mount whatever lens you want to it. So variable scale mapping is something that this camera comes with and basically allows you to crop in the sensor to whatever size you want. So you could pretty much put whatever lens you want on this thing and it's gonna close the sensor down to fit that lens so that you don't get any vignetting in your picture. This camera also comes with a pretty cool feature which is called prime zoom. So it has a Super 35 sensor which is quite large, but you can also put on any lens you want, and if it covers enough of the sensor, you can use the zoom rocker to zoom in even when it's a prime lens. Really, really cool feature. I use it all the time. I find it to be very, very useful. So then you don't really have to have a very big lens on the camera. You can put a smaller one on there and still be able to zoom. So there's that. Another nice feature of this camera is it can shoot high-speed video. So you can shoot 120 frames per second if you choose. You just have to keep in mind that shooting 120 frames per second, it only does it at 50 megabits per second. So the quality gets reduced. It's not bad though, but you got to keep in mind that it's not going to look as good as if you were just shooting 24p. So basically what you can do with this camera is you can shoot 120 frames per second on 24p. The camera will automatically take 120 frames and throw it into a 24p timeline for you. So it automatically stretches out the video for you and makes it slow when you're editing. It's a pretty cool feature. You can also do this with 60 frames, and you could do it 120 frames per second, 24. You could do 120 frames per second, 30. I don't think you could do 120 frames, 60. I'm not sure. I don't think you can. But you could do either one of those, and you could do that with 60p as well. Another nice feature of this camera is it comes with 4K shooting. Not only does it shoot 4K, but it shoots 4K internally to SD cards. And you can shoot in two different flavors. You can shoot in 50 megabits per second or 170 megabits per second. So you can get a high quality or a slightly lower bit quality, and that's depending on, you know, how much space you have on your cards and if your card is capable of capturing 150 megabits per second. If it's not, you could drop it down to 70. So it gives you those options. You can also shoot 4K in cinema 4K, which is a little bit bigger than typical 4K, or just the regular 4K mode, which is slightly smaller. It does both. This camera also comes with J-Log, so you can shoot in log mode and, you know, get more dynamic range in your picture. It does offer that ability as well. I have used it and it definitely does work. So if you're shooting in a condition like this, where you have high shade areas, high bright areas, you can shoot in log, and that should help you out by giving you some more dynamic range. Now, of course, being that this is a proper video camera, you have a top handle, which I really find very useful for getting low angle shots and just holding the camera in general. It makes it a little easier to do. And handling the camera, just putting it on your tripod, having the handle is actually very, very nice. Also on the handle, there are XLR inputs, so you can hook up a proper XLR mic to this camera, and you also have audio controls on it to raise your volume up and down. You can also control the XLR inputs and make them manual, or set them to auto so that the camera controls them. This camera also comes with internal microphones, so if you want to detach the handle, you still have audio that you can capture directly from the camera. If you want to shoot in kind of a sleek way, or you're shooting somewhere and you want to be inconspicuous, you don't want the handle on there, take it off, you still get audio. Another feature that I love about this camera is all of the different buttons that are on the camera. You have buttons for peaking, zebras, expanded focus. You have 2 different record buttons. Actually, you have 3 record buttons, and just a variety of buttons. Another thing is you have quick switches, which I like. So you can preset your white balance to 3 different presets and then just quickly switch between which one you want instead of going through menus. It's also the same for your gain/ISO. You have 3 settings for that as well. And we'll get more into that a little bit later. Another nice thing about this camera that is sometimes missing on some DSLRs, there's a viewfinder. So you can actually, if it's a sunny day like it is right now and the sun is pretty much blinding me, you can use your viewfinder to, quickly get your focus or see the image that you're shooting, just in case your LCD is not doing the job because it's in direct sunlight. And one of my favorite features of this camera are the internal ND filters. I shoot with DSLRs just like everybody else. It's an inexpensive way to shoot and they provide really good image quality, but most of them do not have ND filters. And I can't tell you how many times I'm missing those ND filters when I'm shooting with a DSLR. This comes with 3 levels of ND filters that I find to be hugely useful. It's on a little knob that's very easy to access. It works pretty well. The camera also has a lot of different outputs. It has SDI output and HDMI. So if you need to hook it up to some type of professional monitor that just has SDI, although most these days pretty much have HDMI too, but if you had like an older one that just had SDI, you can do that with this camera, no problem. It also has networking capabilities, so you can stream live footage from this camera. I'm not too familiar with that. I know you're gonna need an adapter. It's not Wi-Fi. It doesn't have like a Wi-Fi card in it, so you can't really control it with your phone. This camera also comes with dual card slots, so you can shoot to 2 cards at once and have a backup, or you can shoot to 1 card and then when it runs out, it will automatically switch over to the other card. And it also gives you the capability to shoot HD footage and then shoot in SD, which I find pretty useless. It would be nice if it allowed you to shoot 4K and also shoot HD, but it does not do that. Now, being that this is a larger scale video camera, the battery life is pretty decent with the stock battery. I believe it's about, I want to say about 4 hours with the stock battery is what you get. You get about 4 hours of recording time, maybe 4.5. And then if you buy an aftermarket battery like I have, you could get it to record about 7 hours. So I definitely recommend buying an aftermarket battery that's a little bit bigger so that basically you can shoot for a whole day and pretty much never have to swap the battery out. Now let's talk about some of the negatives. All right, so first and foremost, I know I mentioned that the camera comes with 4K. 4K is fine. The problem is that to use 4K, the camera crops in on the sensor a lot. So you got to keep that in mind that when you're using 4K, if you're using a 35mm lens or something like that, it's going to crop that thing in a lot and almost make it like a 70mm or something like that. I mean, it crops in a lot. So you have high-speed recording, but when you use high speed, the sensor crops in a lot, even more so than 4K. So then you lose the ability to prime zoom if you're using a prime lens, or even if you're not using a prime lens. You can use prime zoom with a zoom lens too. You lose that ability to zoom in. It goes away because it's cropped in so much. So when you're shooting 4K, you also lose some ability to prime zoom, and actually you lose a lot of the ability to prime zoom, but you still have a little bit. It still gives you just a little push in. Another thing is, it does come with a big sensor. Like I said, it comes with a Super 35 sensor. However, I find that once you start taking it above 1600 ISO, your picture starts to get a little noisy.
So this is ISO 6400, 5000, it's 4000, this is 3200, 2500, 2,000. 1,600.
It's not a huge deal, but it would be nicer if it was noise-free up to 3,200 or maybe even 6,400, but that might be pushing it. But 3,200 would be nice, certainly acceptable. Another thing that really drives me crazy about this camera is I love the fact that you can adjust your audio on the fly while the camera is rolling. The problem is that the knobs are so small that they're almost impossible to operate. So you'll accidentally turn things too high or too low. It's really annoying. I hope when they redesign this camera and do another version of it, they change those knobs and make them so that you can actually operate them properly. Another thing that I don't like about this camera is that it doesn't come with a waveform monitor. I like a waveform monitor way more than I like a histogram. Histogram is okay, but waveform is where it's at. You can really expose your shot properly if you're using a waveform over a histogram. Well, me personally, that's how I feel. So I wish it came with a waveform monitor. Another thing that I don't like is that it doesn't come with Wi-Fi. I wish it had a Wi-Fi card built into it so that you could control it with your phone instead of using that special adapter thing that you got to hook up into the USB port. You know, maybe with that you could control it with your phone. I really don't know because I don't have an adapter that works for this camera. But I just wish it had internal Wi-Fi built in. So another thing that I don't like about the camera is the ergonomics of the camera. Once you get a bigger lens on the front of this camera, like any kind of zoom lens, especially something like the Sigma Art series of lenses, like the 18 to 35s, those things are heavy. It makes the camera extremely front heavy, and where the grip is positioned, it's almost impossible to handhold. So I prefer that they create this camera again with maybe a handle that you could detach and move to a different position. Because if you could slide it further back, it might, well, excuse me, not even further back, but if you could slide it further forward, it might balance it out some. Something, I don't know. I don't know if they even could. So another thing that drives me crazy about this camera is it doesn't have image stabilization built into the camera. I wish it did. A lot of cameras these days are starting to come with that. And it's just an amazing feature to have so that when you are operating it with a monopod or something, or you are hand holding it, it can stabilize your shot and you don't have to have as much rigging to do the job. Another thing that drives me crazy about this camera is even if you have a native micro four thirds lens hooked up to it, the autofocus is very poor. Autofocus does not work. Well, I can't say it doesn't work, but it doesn't work well. It's very slow to find focus on your subject, even if you turn on face tracking, very slow. I could turn it on right now and show you, but I think I already tested that. I did test that. I showed you that in another video where I showed you the Canon adapters. It didn't work well with the Canon adapter, and believe me, it doesn't work well with the micro four thirds lens either. And let's talk about the viewfinder on this camera. So, as I said, it's nice to have a viewfinder when you're in bright conditions and you're not seeing very clearly through the LCD screen. However, the LCD screen to me does pretty well. It's not bad. Right now I'm in bright sunlight and I can see it fine. But I find that when I'm in really bright conditions and I need to use a viewfinder, man, it's just not great. It's when I look into it, the picture is so tiny. It's not super, I don't know. It just doesn't work. Maybe I need to adjust it more. There are a lot of adjustments that you can do to the viewfinder. You can adjust the contrast, and I think you can adjust the detail and the brightness for sure. I know you can adjust. So maybe if I adjust it a little bit better, it might work better for me. So that might be my own fault. So I might be wrong about that one. I got to test that out a little bit more. Okay, and like I said, I really like the ability of having switches to turn my ISO levels to different levels, and also having the switches to quickly adjust to different presets in white balance. And really for white balance, you have 4 presets because the switch has 3 settings, but A and B, or whatever you manually white balance on, so you can set it to whatever you want. And then the preset at the bottom goes back and forth between 2 different presets that you set in the menus. And you'll operate to switch back and forth between them by hitting the manual white balance button that's in the front of the camera. So we'll just quickly switch back between 56K and 3200 if that's what I set it to. But for the ISO adjustments, you only have 3. and 3 is just not enough in most situations. So I have it set to 400, which is the base ISO for this camera, and then I'll usually have it set to around 800 or 1250, and then I have the top one set to about 3200. But I find that's not enough. I wish I can choose some of the levels in between. And there is a slight workaround around that. You could set one of the presets to be automatic. So basically you can set it to be an automatic ISO and tell the camera, yes, this is automatic, but don't go over 3200. You can set that. You can set a limiter. So that's one way around it, but I would just prefer to maybe have 4 or 5 different adjustments. Matter of fact, JVC, if you're watching, what you could do is take the shutter button at the back, and why can't you just click that? Click it once, it's shutter. Click it again, it's iris. Click it again, it's ISO. And then use the up and down arrows at the back of the camera to adjust all those things in increments. I don't know. That would make life a lot easier. And then you also have the switches if you want, but you can also use increments if you want. Maybe in a firmware update, they might change that. Maybe not. So anyway, I think I went through all the different features of the cameras. I told you why I like it, why I don't. So now I'm gonna give you my overall opinion about this camera. You've probably seen a couple of videos that I've done on different cameras, and some I've already sold. This one I don't plan on selling. I did sell the JVC 170U for various reasons, and I think I'm gonna do a separate video on that, and I'll tell you why. And I basically upgraded to this one. I am liking this camera. Overall, it does a very good job. I love the fact that it has all these quick buttons to do things. I love the fact that it has a bigger sensor and allows me to put different lenses onto the camera so I can be as creative as I want with my shot selection. So overall, JVC, I think you're doing a good job. And I also like the fact that JVC puts out firmware upgrades on this camera for free. Right now, I think they're on version 4, where they added some additions to 4K shooting, and boy, I can't remember the other ones. There were certain things that I don't care about, but it's nice that they keep adding features to this camera and they give it to you for free. So, good job. Anyway, if you found this review to be helpful, please like it, share it to anybody you know who's interested in this particular camera. Leave comments if you have any questions for me, because like I said, I've been using this camera for about 2 months and I've done quite a bit of testing. Thanks for watching, and I guess I'll see you soon.